Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 9th International Skill Forum, the Marketplace. I'm Sam, and I'm the chairperson of Pollinate Singapore, which I will share a little bit more about with you very shortly. This afternoon, I've been actually asked to share about the two areas. One is actually in the area of the TVET-based startup, ideation, incubation, and entrepreneurship. And especially if it's international, should it be actually done institutionally or should it be done at the national level in terms of coordination? The second area that I was actually asked to share was actually in the area of good practices in startup incubation. Maybe just before I move on, I was quite fortunate to have been a serial entrepreneur sequentially, and I think I've been to a fair degree, fairly fortunate to have successful exits. And since then, I've been actually asked to help develop and to support build the Singapore ecosystem, both at the institutional level and also at the national level. So about 4 years ago, there was actually a opportunity that was presented to develop a platform to tap on thousands of young minds to effect change. And maybe to also give you a little bit of the context at that point in time, a lot of the institutions were very much focused on building their own unique ecosystems within the institution. There were many incubators and accelerators in the ecosystem as well. Of course, many startups, but there were none that were actually cross-platform. In other words, being able to work, have the institutions work together and collaborate and even corroborate in terms of building skill sets for startups. So with that, about 4 years ago, there was actually an opportunity where the National Research Foundation, which is actually a part of the Prime Minister's office, came in to actually support a platform where it actually went across different institutions, and I was actually very fortunate to be part of it. So the intent for this particular platform was that it was actually do a few things. Number one, if you do see the genesis of typically an individual's life in terms of the working life, typically I would basically say kind of swings in when you actually go into the TVET area, when they're basically about 18, 19, 20, and as they get into the universities. And actually it goes on beyond that. So the intent for Pollinate, which is actually this cross-institutional platform, was actually to be able to support our students and graduates on their entrepreneurship journey, as well as in the spirit of lifelong learning, continue to engage them as they go on their journey. So this is actually the makeup of the platform. There are actually 5 institutions right now. As for government institutions, IHLs, there are actually 11, and of which this actually forms roughly about close to half of the institutions where we've actually gathered together to form this platform. This is, to my knowledge, the only national cross-institutional ecosystem, and the intent for the platform is to groom from academic from a bridge between academic to be able to achieve commercial outcomes. So in a nutshell, this is actually the pathway that we're actually looking at, whereby you're looking at students from 17 to 23-year-olds from the IHLs, being able to be supported by their own respective individual campus incubation support. And in this case, we're going across from the campus, and then as they basically move on, Pollinate is actually playing that role to be able to pipeline these students and to be able to then manage that whole process together in conjunction with the campus incubation support, and then to be able to groom them and then move them forward to join as they basically continue to grow, to be able to continue to join the global commercial ecosystem as startups and as even larger entities. We've been actually pretty successful in the outcomes so far in the last 4 years, which we have actually, I think most importantly, the teams collectively have actually raised about 72.7 million. Bearing in mind, these teams have actually almost literally, from a genesis standpoint, started from the respective institutions, and many of them just have actually started very much as ideas. So collectively, they've raised about $72.7 million. We've also pleased to see that many of the startups have actually gained quite a bit of traction, of which about 20 of them, we've actually been working with them to groom them, and they've actually achieved greater than $250,000 in terms of revenue. I think as another advantage of having a national platform is that we are able to coordinate the outcomes from actually all the member institutions that we actually have. We are actually also able to coordinate the training right across. We're actually also able to even coordinate the business investments and mentors to be able to aggregate them, to be able to then appoint them into different teams. And actually this provides us with very, very large synergies. So just as a quick breakdown, these are some of the teams as an example, some of the funds that have actually been raised by the various teams, and as well as teams that actually have secured traction over the years. And in this case, basically getting more than 250,000 in terms of revenue. Now, so I think one of the key things that and very, very pertinent questions that was actually raised and faced, especially at the institutional level, is a certain dichotomy where you're looking at academic rigor versus a commercial outcome. And what I have found is that there's actually big challenges trying to get the academics to tend to look at it from a commercial standpoint, and also vice versa, where you're actually looking at a commercial standpoint and looking at it from a and engaging the academics. So how did we basically get past this conundrum? That's question number one. The second point is that in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship learning, is it actually relevant in a TVET setting? In fact, I was actually also asked, are we dealing with just a small number of students who are just looking at entrepreneurship and innovation? Or are these skill sets that they've actually picked up very much relevant to even their day-to-day, or as they basically work in, let's say they join a corporate entity? Are these skill sets that they've actually picked up during the journey in terms of their innovation and entrepreneurship journey, are they actually relevant? So what we have found, yes, oh, sorry, there's somebody in the background. Yes, so what we have actually found is that there is indeed value for enterprise and entrepreneurship education in TVETs and IHLs. In this case, we have actually found that there's actually positive impacts that they actually gain when they actually get employed. Positive influences on creativity. Their brain juices somehow become a lot more flexible and part of the innovation process. I think they also latch on very much in terms of becoming more active citizens and being able to latch on to something that they feel very strongly about. This is an observation that we've actually seen, and this could actually be in both on a commercial standpoint, or it could even be in a social context. We've also seen positive impacts in terms of learning attainments, and as they basically get very motivated, we also see grades actually do improve, and also in terms of stakeholders engagement. Now, I just want to share a video with you where this is actually one of the students that actually went through the entrepreneurship learning and program. And although she didn't carry on in her startup, this is actually her feedback and her feelings after she actually joined a major
Hi, so I'm eating. So I used to be an incubatee at Spinoff, and I was with a startup called Code, and later on I tried starting my own called Gym Essentials, basically offering gym essentials next to the gym in a vending machine. And through that experience, I learned how to effectively communicate with my teammates, build confidence, and also the really nook and crannies of starting a business. Mainly because I came from a science background, so I never really knew all these things, and it was only after going into Spinoff that I could learn all these skills. And afterwards, when I went for my job interviews and working in different companies, I realized that my skills that I've learned in Spinoff actually made a big difference in how I presented myself and how I talk to my teammates and the way I think. I think it has forced me, back when I was in Spinoff, I learned how to think creatively and out of the box, and that really helped me true to my work environment, because now whenever I'm met with problems, I think creatively, and I do think that it will help impact many students and make a difference in many people's life if they could learn these skills. So yeah.
Right. So what I actually wanted to share is that, in fact, this is actually just one example, but we actually do have many, many, many students who, in fact, you can actually see the transformation. Once they actually go through a program like this, they change from a generally very docile individual, and they basically pick up a lot of skill sets, including um, I think once they basically do catch on to something they feel very strongly about, you actually see self-discipline kicking in, being able to focus on deadlines, develop strong confidence, can-do attitudes. They start asking very, very interesting questions. You can literally see that their brain is actually ticking away. You can see that they also start to take a little bit more risk. Generally, I think it's students here, they tend to be a little bit risk adverse. You could see that they take baby steps to basically grow in this area. And they actually look at managing workplace uncertainty very much better. Look at how you could also see that because they're actually very focused in terms of the outcome, they have a tendency to be able to work, at least force themselves to work in terms of together the team. And you could see that their brain juices are actually thinking quite a bit more in terms of trying to generate initiatives and original thought. So what I just wanted to emphasize on this particular slide is that the entrepreneurship and innovation learning is actually something which actually the students actually do take away, and is actually very useful for them way beyond the point of graduation. So coming back, it is not just for in what we've actually seen is actually not a program for just one, a handful of people, but these are actually skill sets that actually are developed along the way. So as you basically look at how the relevancy of a program like this is actually towards employment, you could see that then you're actually looking at those that actually go down the entrepreneurship route versus that those that actually are looking at building competencies specifically that will actually be relevant to them when they actually go out to work in the enterprise. And you find that the behaviors, the attributes, the outcomes, and the competencies are actually pretty aligned, which I will actually have another slide on this. Just before I go on also, I thought also just to share with you that there are actually many different types of entrepreneurship. There's obviously the, I think very much relevant to the Asian Development Bank. We're actually looking at social outcomes in terms of social entrepreneurship, being able to help the disadvantaged in whatever way possible. Of course, there's green entrepreneurship, there's also digital entrepreneurship, which would be very much more in the commercial area. And there's actually the entrepreneurship. Actually, these would actually form the bulk of the people that will actually go through this, because they would actually be joining probably enterprises or even institutions, or maybe even the SME. So with that, I thought I'll just bring up also another sharing that was done earlier 2 days ago at the ADB forum by Pankaj Mahel. He actually started Gram Heat, and he actually also went through the academic pathway, went on to do his master's, went on to the Tata, I think, social enterprise arm. And then after that, he found his calling to start Gram Heat, which basically focuses on a problem out there, which is actually the storage of goods, creating credit for people on the ground, and also providing market linkages through the platform. So this would actually be an example of somebody who has actually gone through the academic system, found a calling, and felt very strongly to be able to start something to solve a real world challenge. And interestingly, take away from his sharing earlier on at the ADB forum was that the academic experience was not enough. And he actually emphasized this. So interestingly, this is something as we basically start building our institutional incubators and accelerators, it is very important to link and build a bridge between what is actually academic rigor. Of course, that's actually very important in terms of developing a student. But at the same time, to be able to build the bridge and to help the student move from an academic environment into something which is actually not only more commercial, but even entrepreneurial. And then in terms of what is actually then needed to develop entrepreneurial skill sets, and what is then also needed to develop the skill sets of young workers who are actually already in the system. So these were actually very interesting points that he actually raised. Interestingly, also on in the same forum, another initiative from social entrepreneurship by Dr. Chutima from Kasasat University in Thailand. They actually have their own programs as well. They actually have their own programs as well, where you're actually looking at grooming the students in terms of both from the food as well as from their fishery model, as well as their textiles. So you can see that there's actually quite a bit of initiatives from each and every school. And therefore, that's why I come to the point where you're actually having each and every school doing very, very good work. But then at the national level, perhaps it would actually be very good to be able to work and coordinate a lot of this. So take, for example, where different universities and different TVET institutions actually have very special, various focuses in terms of in terms of agri. And in fact, when I basically look across many institutions, not only in Singapore, but right across, a lot of them are actually, to some degree, actually repeating the same exercise. Again, I would just say that they're actually doing very good work, but it would actually have been very nice to have been able to coordinate some of these things, as well as to be able to leverage on each other. I think that's actually the very powerful outcome, whereby in terms of strengths from one institution versus another institution, being able to leverage from one to the other. And to be able to then having that 1 + 1 = 3 effect. So coming back, is there indeed a need for structured and coordinated efforts to drive entrepreneurial skills development institutionally or nationally? I think you can probably hear my answer would actually be a very resounding yes, especially working with the institutions, but being able to coordinate this nationally. And in fact, just now, I've actually also showed you some of the positive outcomes, both from a commercial standpoint, as well as the opportunities for the institutions to work together. Okay. So from my experience so far, as you can see, the ecosystem that has actually been built up in Singapore, one of the things that I actually highlighted on the left-hand side is actually, if you notice, I've actually put a note there, creating a strong foundation on campus. If you basically say what is actually really important, this is actually something that's actually very, very important before you can actually build it at the national level. Because having a very strong foundation makes it a lot easier at the national level to be able to bring everything together. I guess that's actually quite obvious. So in terms of building a strong foundation, this is actually where we found the challenge was actually the strongest. Again, this is where the academic portion of the house is actually now starting to meet the commercial. And sometimes we actually notice that if in a environment where the institution is supportive and is actually very outward looking, this generally is less of a problem. But where institutions that tend to be too academically focused, sometimes this is indeed a challenge, and as also a challenge because the outcomes and the attributes that you're actually looking at tend to be more soft skills. And in terms of being able to measure them, not just one attribute, but you're actually looking at a whole string of attributes towards being able to be a good entrepreneur or a good innovator. This then becomes really a very big challenge for to be able to capture this under academic program. So first and foremost, what we actually would be also looking at as we basically try to put this into an academic context is to be able to develop a mindset change. In terms of academic program, again, a lot of times this is actually done very much where you're actually downloading domain expertise, domain knowledge, whether it's in engineering or in computer science or in psychology. And a lot of times, as you basically start going into the application end, this is where the academic part meets the commercial end. And as I am actually highlighting here, as we basically build a mindset change, these are actually some of the areas that we actually will need to put into the academic program, where you're actually looking at participation in terms of even encouraging failure, where the students actually go through failure. Sometimes this is actually very difficult because the education system is actually sometimes very focused on success, whereby if you are the A student, where the students get to go through my experience also, I've actually seen students whereby they've never had the chance to actually very failure, they literally collapse. In terms of thinking, action-oriented, thinking in the sense that you're not looking at just thinking is actually very important, because you're looking at confidence. Basically looking at just now the example, like for Graham Heath, in the early example,
Sam, I think we are experiencing some problems with your sound. Maybe you switch off your camera for a moment while you're presenting.
The CEO actually left a very cushy job because he actually felt very driven and motivated in terms of what he actually could actually be working on. So this is something that from an entrepreneurship, if you're looking at entrepreneurship education standpoint, in terms of value creation for businesses and all society. Of course, from a learning standpoint, if you're basically looking at it from an enterprise education, in terms of value creation, this is, of course, from either a personal standpoint, or these are actually learning that will actually be useful for them when they actually join the working environment. Okay, so as I mentioned, what drove Graham Heath was that he was actually very curious towards driving new possibilities for creating he actually difficulty in terms of having cash flow, in terms of the crops, having storage availability so that the whatever they've actually grown doesn't rot. And this was something that he felt very, very strongly about. Mindset changes, which we actually see as we act, where the students actually come out very successfully on the other side of the program. You really literally see a lot of these changes happen with us. Again, coming back from anchoring from a academic standpoint, and then moving it across. First and foremost, actually, a lot of the students, when they first come in, they are not even aware about what entrepreneurship is, or let alone even innovation. So in terms of the steps, one of the first things is to be able to build awareness and understanding what innovation and actually entrepreneurship means. So in terms of building a program level, this is actually one very, very important step, because without which there won't be that pipeline. The next would, of course, be two-pronged. One is actually developing the entrepreneurial mindset, which I've actually shared briefly about. And then after that, you're looking at the entrepreneurial competencies. If you look at the wheel on the right-hand side, into actually 16 different areas, which is again why literally you find that it's
I think we are experiencing some sound problems, Sam. I'm not sure how to rectify that. Apologies to our colleagues here. I mean, Sam has already switched off his camera, but
okay. Is this better? Is it?
Do we have, by any chance, I don't know if it's possible, but do you have by any chance another second choice for maybe hotspot or something? Because the last 5 minutes we're experiencing a lot of breakage, and
okay.
we're losing really. I mean, it was okayish, but there is sometimes a second or two we're missing, and that's a little bit unfortunate. Is there any solution from your side? I mean, you have already switched off your webcam. And now even your screen is breaking, I hear from one of our participants.
Sam, if you're using VPN, can you turn it off?
So while Sam is actually trying to hopefully find a solution, we were going to have still 15 minutes. So if you have any quick questions to Sam, please write it in the chat, right? But now I don't know if you lost our speaker. So please bear with us. I'm sure he's coming back any moment, and my colleague will keep an eye on the waiting room.
Yes. Hi. Okay. I'm back. So sorry.
Yes, it sounds very clear. Over to you, Sam. And how long is your presentation more?
I think it should be ending quite shortly.
Okay. So
okay.
Please put questions in the chat. Thank you, Sam.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So what you find is that a lot of institutions actually do find that there's actually a lot of challenges in terms of putting all these things together. There are actually 16 different competencies, and this is where we will actually work very closely with them to help them. Okay, so this particular table basically kind of brings you across from the awareness end to the mindset change end, as we basically flip into between curriculum and going beyond the curriculum, and then going into literally doing in terms of capability, and then after that being able to be effective. So in terms of then applying this, what we have actually done in our member institutions, and this is where we're actually able to apply more than for every year. We're actually able to look at many resources in terms of people to be able to work on these challenges to actually go solve problems out there. And it becomes a win-win because it helps the NGOs, it helps the enterprises. At the same point in time, it's actually a learning journey for our students. And as they basically move from that path, they basically move down the pathway. So these are just examples of some of the direct working in terms of how we actually engage. Now, this is another example of how somebody who actually goes through this learning could actually be helping a community overseas, and in this case in the Philippines. Okay, so I just like to actually share with you that you can actually see that once you actually set up a platform like this, from both at the institutional level, and of course you have many institutions. So we're actually having many of such teams. You're looking at literally hundreds potentially from each institution, and then coordinated across the nation. Okay, and the other point I just wanted to also share is that you're actually looking at being able to help institutions from, communities from everywhere. If this is actually more from an NGO perspective, and these are actually very useful resources where they can become agents of change. So in terms of best practices for programs that you're actually looking at putting in, I think I'm sure each and every one of you here would actually already have some form of it, but I thought I'd just narrow it down into what are some of the key areas that you probably be wanting to have within your program. First and foremost, programs that actually drive creativity and innovation. So that's one. The programs that you actually run should actually also provide opportunity for recognition of creation and evaluation. So this basically provides feedback in terms of real opportunities, especially spectrum of possible ideas that working with. Now, it's actually very important you actually have very good mentors for calibration, because a student will know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, or for that matter, even any startup new founders. So it's actually very good to actually have very good mentors to be there, to be able to provide the calibration. Decision making, in terms of providing opportunity for them to critically analyze, synthesize, and judgment. And again, mentors are very important here to be able to validate the final judgment and the synthesis process. Digital state and data skills are very straightforward, because most of the institutions actually have this in play. Implementation ideas through leadership and management, where they actually put together as startups, or even working on a project like just now the tomato jam. The student actually really took it upon herself to actually help, to want to help the community. Opportunities for action and reflection, to be able to heighten the level of self-awareness as they basically do introspection. And also opportunities for communication and strategy skills, whether it's actually pitching or being able to work with the mentors to actually strategize how they should actually approach the problem. I think one of the other takeaways is that given that we've actually been doing this both at the institutional level as well as the national level, we found that having the right teams and then being able to do it centrally within the institution as well as nationally is actually very useful. One of the experiences also is that at the institutional level, a lot of times, because the innovation entrepreneurship may not be given very high prioritization, you find that there are actually a lot of different schools would tend to have their arms and legs into these programs. What we found is that they tend to be less effective because again, there's no aggregation, there's no sharing, there's no integration. So again, one of the key recommendations is you should be trying to see how you can actually drive this. Venture building programs, student encouragement programs, where they actually encourage students for some of the learning outcomes, to be able to map and articulate institutional development. I think this is actually very important, because this is actually the buy-in from an institutional level. And I think just quickly jumping to the end, you'll find that one of the very important things where you're able to also link up with businesses, social enterprises, even alumni who are actually very in tune in the industry. These are actually a lot of sources of ideas and challenges where you find that it tends to spark off these students. Now, I'm actually also presenting another, some of the venture building programs. You actually will see that it actually goes from at the institutional level, at the ideation stage, and as it basically moves along into pre-startups, funding. I guess different countries also have different funding programs. I think in Singapore, we're pretty fortunate where the government is actually very supportive. And there's actually a lot of VCs also available here. So there's quite a bit of opportunities. I think as another point, I'd like to be able to also extend a very warm welcome to startups from all the different countries in the Asian Development Bank geographies. To be happy to actually link up with our startups here to tap on the funding that's actually available here in Singapore. And I think we've actually been able to do that quite successfully, and we look forward to actually working with more. And of course, then to be able to move on into some of the startup phases and to post-startup. I cannot underemphasize the importance of having a very strong mentorship pool, because literally the startups, especially the founders, being that this is the first time, they're actually white pieces of paper. So it's actually very important to have very, very good mentors within the program to be able to guide them. Now, I think I just wanted to put this slide here because you find that everyone over time, we found that actually every student over time has actually displayed that they found a purpose to be able to want to do something, and that has actually driven them to grow. And I mean, take for example, in the example earlier on, where you're looking at the blockchain, one of the founders actually felt that this was something that he felt very strongly about, and the team actually raised 20 million. Given that it was literally from an idea to something which they gained some traction. So I thought today I'll just share a little bit about our experiences in running the incubator and accelerator, and how the innovation program is actually important for education, not just from just helping a small group of people, but in fact, it's actually very relevant for every student that goes through the institution.
Yeah.
So yes.
Sam, I just have to cut you a little bit here because
Sure.
as we are sharing the space with our next speaker from London, and who has already, of course, arrived.
Sure.
So can you maybe just spend one more minute? I mean, you already invited all our colleagues here in this chat to connect. So there is a QR code. Is there anything else you would like to share how to follow up? Because we won't be able to have a Q&A anymore in this space, out of respect to our second speaker who is actually occupying the 45 minutes.
So with this QR code, we'll be very much happy to see if you're actually from an institution or at the national level, we're actually happy to connect and to be able to grow this and jointly work together to build a pan-Asia ecosystem. So if you can go to this QR code, just drop your interest and we will connect.
So let's keep this QR code for another minute there. And please give a nice virtual hand to Samuel Ang, the chairperson of Pollinate, for this session. Unfortunately, the presentation was a little bit longer, so that there is no more opportunity to actually to ask questions or share something. Dr. Rocky, for example, wanted to say something, but unfortunately, out of respect, and as we are sharing the same Zoom link with our next speaker, so this was actually, so you'll just listen to TVET-based Startup Ideation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship with Sam Ang, and hopefully you all gonna stay for the second part.
So maybe I'll just put in a quick note. If you would like to actually ask your questions, you could also go to this same QR code and just drop in a note, and I'll be happy to answer your questions separately.
Okay, that's a fantastic offer. So hopefully, please make use of that. And maybe we stop sharing the slide in 10 seconds. And thanks again, Sam Ang. And I welcome actually also then maybe as a second speaker here in our breakout session at the Innovation Marketplace, we have with us Kajal Sangachka, and she can hopefully correct my pronunciation later. She's the leader and co-founder of Columbia University's first incubator for graduate entrepreneurs in New York. And she's also the director of Growth Hub Global, a London-based advisory which helps to drive entrepreneurial growth in business, education, and society. I will invite her to say a little bit more about herself. I guess you're all curious who she is. And then she will guide us through a session, good practice in startup, incubation, inclusive entrepreneurship. Last but not least, I'm not sure how long, Kajal, you want to present. However, I encourage you all use heavily the chat function, write comments, and if you have questions, so hopefully we can fish out some questions in the chat, because that's quicker than unmuting yourself and ask the question yourself. So that's so we have to accelerate a little bit. We have a 45-minute schedule, so if Kajal is okay, we maybe continue 5 minutes longer, and if you, my dear colleagues, still have energy. So over to you.
Thank you, Josh. That wasn't actually a bad pronunciation. So Kajal Sangachka, welcome everybody, and very happy to be here on the first International Skills Forum I've been on. So I just wanted to make sure you can see my screen. Does that work?
Yes,
Josh?
that works very nice. Yes, I confirm.
Brilliant. So as Josh mentioned, I am the director of Growth Hub Global, where I support entrepreneurial growth in business and with educational institutions. And most recently, I was the director of the London School of Economics' first ever accelerator program. And like Sam, prior to that, ran several companies, so have all the scars of entrepreneurship to talk about. But today, what I really want to focus on is good practices in startup incubation. And primarily at universities, which is where I focused my work over the past few years, and why I am very passionate about teaching and developing entrepreneurial skills now more than ever since we've had the pandemic. So just to set some context, why do we care about startup incubation? We all know that job security has been threatened, especially since the recession, but we have things like globalization, outsourcing, robotics and AI, which are completely changing the future of work. And for graduates who I've been working with from universities, the impact of the pandemic was fairly severe. Around 30% lost jobs or internship placements they had, and they really needed alternatives. They needed a way to be able to make their own salary. So we hadn't seen youth unemployment at that level in the UK, at least since the 1980s. And given the ongoing uncertainty in the labour market, universities will play an ever more critical role in equipping students with entrepreneurial skills they need to survive. So this is just an excerpt from the World Economic Forum, reinforcing what I've just said, and how millennials really do need to be able to shape their future. And in fact, in a recent survey by Ernst & Young, 71% of millennials recognize that entrepreneurial skills such as taking risks, resilience, and adaptability are all very important traits, but many feel less confident in these skills. Certainly conversations I've had with students, many are anxious about their futures, and that's why demand for entrepreneurship and programs like accelerators and incubators has been rising over the past 5 years. So today, I want to take you through 3 best practices from my experience, and I'll go through some very specific case studies. One is the Columbia University Incubator, which I actually co-founded as a student several years ago. More recently, the London School of Economics first accelerator program, which was designed and launched during the pandemic. And the last program which I ran, which was across 10 universities in the UK, so really combining different disciplines and ecosystems to see how those entrepreneurs came together. So I'll only scratch the surface of these best practices, but there will be an opportunity for Q&A later, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn if you have questions about designing your own programs. So,
Can I just ask you, Kajal, there was a
Yes.
question. I mean, on my screen, it's not 100% full screen. Is there a way of making it even bigger? Although your slides are perfect and they are large font. Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. You can see that now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yes.
It's bigger.
Okay, great. So the first thing I would say is develop curriculum market fit. Now, what do I actually mean by that? There are thousands of accelerators out there starting up every day, and many are not structured to the realities of the market or what founders will face. So one of the first things we did, this is for the LSE Accelerator, which was a 6-month program launched in 2020. We made sure we had a very, very clear mission statement, which was, Sam talked about this earlier, but driving commercial growth, which was a very big factor, but also recognizing that we needed to nurture entrepreneurial leaders. Many of the startup ventures could fail. And so what we want those leaders to be able to do is either start a new venture or be able to carry those skills into their careers, whatever they end up doing. So for some accelerators, this could be the amount of investment raised. They could have other areas of emphasis, but this really helps you to then drive the metrics and how you want to measure the program over the course of the time that you have the startups with them. So once you have a very, very clear mission statement, we actually went back and looked at data on why are the top reasons startups fail. So you can see the top 3 here. Running out of cash is the most common one. And the second 2, no market need or got out competed. So those first 2 are so common that we needed to make sure that our curriculum put emphasis on those things. So we had emphasis on really customer validating your solution. So looking at the problem and making sure that there were customers out there willing to buy. So we had a whole phase at the beginning of the accelerator on customer discovery and finding that product market fit, but also at the very beginning, understanding what type of entrepreneur you are and what kind of financing options are available to you. And there is a language that goes along with that. Many accelerators, I would say, push entrepreneurs down just the venture capital route, but the reality is that's not necessarily suitable for everyone. So I think it's very, very important to understand what your founder set is and where they sit on that financing picture. So once we had these 2 things, the next thing I would say, and this is, for any accelerator program you're designing, is what are the core components to be able to articulate a curriculum that makes sense? In our case, we had 3 major components: business fundamentals, so boot camps, which take you through all of the nuts and bolts of actually running a business, from branding to customer discovery and business model innovation. The second thing, digitization, we actually had a massive emphasis on because of COVID. So this wasn't necessarily featured as a major part of the curriculum when we designed it, but obviously when the world went into lockdown, we found a number of our businesses which needed to pivot to e-commerce very, very quickly, almost at the drop of a hat. And the last thing, which I mentioned in the mission statement, and I'll talk about later, so I won't go into detail now, is leadership. That early on in the startup journey, the founder is effectively the business. So their cognitive space and their ability to manage this business is a huge part of the success. So we made sure we had bespoke coaching for each of those leaders. So once we had all of those architectural components in place, we then were able to design a curriculum that was fit for market and fit for purpose at the time. So hopefully you can see this. I'll just try to increase my screen a bit more. But the top half is all of the business fundamentals that we went through, and the second half is clinics. So we actually had designed and planned this accelerator in person. Now, 2 days before we were due to go live, COVID hit. So we literally, over the course of 2 weeks, had to pivot this all to a digital model. And the core curriculum, we ended up at the front end adapting so that people were able to learn about digital marketing. They were able to learn about sales online. They were able to learn about how to construct websites, because that was the only route to business for most of them. So again, you know, the message here is that when you're designing these programs, things can change very, very fast in the market. So it's important to leave yourself leeway to adapt as you're going through. So this whole curriculum wasn't constructed up front from the beginning. We had room to change course as and when we got feedback from the founders, and also in response to how things were on a macro level for people actually running the startups in practice. So just a quick comment on these things. The clinics, the boot camps were all taught by people who had actually run businesses or were experts who supported startups in those areas. And I can't emphasize this enough. Again, I think this is something Sam talked about earlier. If you're too academic and you don't have practical hands-on material, this really won't work. So the sessions that resonated the most were really actually from alumni founders from the LSE who had very tactical and grassroots insights. And these were things that you can't just go and Google. So things like, how do you automate your operations using cloud technology so you can spend most of your time on sales? How do you incentivize and structure a package for your first hires? Or what's the best fit platform for your e-commerce store? These are very nuanced and practical questions which only a certain type of instructor can answer. So be very, very discerning in who you bring on to teach these, because it will change the experience of those founders. Now, one thing I want to emphasize, and this goes back to my comment earlier, that many startups fail because of a lack of cash. So when you think about finance, we really paid attention to different sources and diverse sources of finance for our founders, not just the venture capital route, which I would say wasn't even relevant for 50% of all of the accelerators that I've run. So one thing we did is we had a number of social entrepreneurs. So we were able to just map out, this was a lady called Borita Doshi who came in, who mapped out all the different impact investors that those sustainable companies with mission-driven companies could actually go to and talk to. So again, the takeaway here when you're designing the curriculum is please pay attention to those differences and the diversity, and make sure the founders have exposure to everything from angels to grants to venture capital to impact investment. And that way they'll find that best fit earlier, and hopefully they won't run out of cash by the end of the accelerator. The other thing which I will add here is we did give everyone stipends. So it was a small stipend, but about $1,000 a month, which really helped to increase the runway of their startup and enable them to fund some of their living expenses to be able to do it full time. So just wanted to give you a quick idea of numbers, and this really focuses on the business impact. So this is just one accelerator, but across several, I would say we had over 100 people hired, plenty of new customers, in this case, less than $1 million raised, but across several accelerators, at least 10 million raised. So I won't go deep into the key performance indicators here, but what I would say to you in terms of best practice is try to have those success metrics early on. And these might be tangible, this might be quantitative, but it might also be qualitative. So one thing we did was confidence measures. We asked people some of our startups to look at how confident they felt at the beginning of the accelerator, and then how confident they felt at the end of the accelerator. So there are different types of metrics you can use, but it's really important to define at least some of them up front so you know how successful those programs have actually been, because it is a fairly significant investment, especially on a university level. So the next thing I want to go through is nurturing startup leaders. The last program we ran, which was across 10 universities, and it's specifically focused on social entrepreneurship and mission-driven businesses, we really found that the leaders and their passion and their mission was something we really had to create space for. and tailor some parts of our program in order for them to be effective. So what did we do? At the beginning of the program, we interviewed all of the founders. We spent probably 2 or 3 hours with them, understanding what areas of leadership they want to develop. And I've just highlighted some of the most frequent themes here. So one thing was confidence. How do you build confidence for them as a leader? Because many of them were first-time founders and had never done this before. The second and third things, hiring and managing teams and delegation. So these are some of the things that were coming out when we interviewed people. And what we quickly realized is that you can't teach this on a PowerPoint screen. We needed to immerse them in the experience, have them actually do these things so that when they left the accelerator, they can be more prepared when they're out in the real world. So in designing this program, so you can see on the right, this is actually the whole curriculum here, but on the left are some of the main components. We actually provided over 150 hours in one-to-one founder support. Mentorship, which was actually critical. We matched each of our businesses to service and industry experts, and we gave them an opportunity to actually coach each other. We found some of the peer learning was one of the most valuable things to each of those founders in the program. And the fourth thing, which I've done actually across accelerators, is give them the opportunity to hire an intern. If you can subsidize this for your founders, I would really recommend this, because there is no better way for them to learn about hiring, managing a team, and then delegating the work. And this is everything from posting your job copy to designing the package, and then troubleshooting if any problems arise. Now, one thing we didn't expect to find, or at least I didn't expect to find, was how differently male and female founders operated. So one thing to be aware of is that you may have to tailor parts of your program to recognize just unique barriers that men and women face. So let me give you just a really quick anecdote of this. I asked our founders, the last class, to give me financial projections over 3 to 5 years. The men would come back with projections in the millions, and the women would often come back with projections in the hundreds of thousands. So this just got me thinking about why those differences occur and what can we do about it. And actually, this is just a stat from the UK on the level of the gap between male and female entrepreneurs. And really, when you design these programs, you do have to recognize those gaps. There's an extent to which you can create bespoke programming, but what we did was just have a few sessions where some of the female entrepreneurs could talk about some of the unique barriers they faced. So the reason why I illustrate this point is just to give you some insight into some of the things you may face when you design these programs. And while it's not practical to be entirely bespoke, just you as leaders being recognizing these differences can really go a long way. So the last thing I want to talk about is invest in your startup alumni and the lifelong entrepreneurial skills that go with them. Now, this is neglected on many programs, and it's something that we've invested a lot of effort on, in fact, over the last few months. Many of our programs have been digital, but we have found that having a physical space for our alumni to come back to makes a huge difference for that connectivity and for that community to support each other. So this is a picture of the first incubator, which we co-founded. This was in New York. It was just a very small room, but it was a place that everyone could convene. And this is what it looks like today. So many of the alumni community are able to come back to this space to mentor, to teach, and to really pay it forward, which many of them want to do. The other thing we find is, of course, not every startup will succeed. And having that community there to support during tough times, whether you've gone into a job, whether your startup has succeeded or failed, is really critical. And I just want to flick up something. I did a very quick search on what are the top skills in demand in the workforce today. So this is an excerpt from a job website called Indeed.com. So you can see on the left-hand side, soft skills like people management, sales leadership, creativity, and hard skills, cloud computing, AI, mobile app development. All of these things we were actually able to cover to some degree on the accelerator program, but actually so much of this learning becomes exponential after the accelerator program. So all of those alumni have such a rich knowledge base that you want to continue to share and continue to drive. What we found during the pandemic is many people, many of our alumni, either who were carrying on their startups, who had gone into corporate careers, were finding they wanted to pivot and they wanted to change. I must have had about 60 conversations with people who were intentionally moving out of the corporate world actually to start their own businesses, or alumni who'd started businesses, went to jobs, and then wanted to start another business and wanted to refresh that knowledge. So in response to this, we actually started something called the Portfolio Entrepreneur Community, and I'll share the link at the end of this. And this is really in response to many of the challenges that people were facing during COVID. And we actually asked this group, what are the top skills that you believe you need as an entrepreneur or to prepare you for the entrepreneurial career path? And the top 3 things were emotional resilience, adaptability, and people management. And having that community there, people were able to develop some of those soft skills, but also extend some of the things they'd learned from accelerators. So we would really, really like to encourage any of you designing programs, don't just think about it as a 4 to 6 month piece of work. Think about this as alumni community who have a chance to give back and continue to develop those lifelong skills. I want to just stop there because I know we're running out of time, but if you want any more information on learning entrepreneurial skills at university, I've written extensively on the topic. You can find this online. And you can also go to my website, and there's a LinkedIn portfolio entrepreneur community, which I'll share. But the last thing I just wanted to end on here is a quote by Muhammad Yunus, which I found really inspirational in terms of my own businesses and when I support founders to build their businesses. All human beings are born entrepreneurs. Some get a chance to unleash that capacity and some never got the chance. So the way that I see this is we are in a unique position as educators to really build programs that are fit for purpose and give those entrepreneurs and those university graduates, especially in difficult times, a chance to unleash that entrepreneurial capacity. So I'll stop there, Josh, and I will publish, I'll just send you a few links on the chat, but please do ask questions and I'm happy to answer.
Thanks very much, Kajal. And yes, great if you put some links into the chat so people can actually click on them and save them right away. And I noticed there were 2 colleagues, 2 participants already asking questions, and I hope we get some more. The first person is Erica. She's asking, why is the venture capital route irrelevant to 50% of the founders?
So thanks, Erica, for the question. So I would say this was more for, we had accelerators which were at the very early stages. So they were just too early for venture capital in some cases. So what they really needed to do was go towards angels and friends and family or grants. It was a much better route for them to get traction and get the benchmarks they would then need to raise venture capital successfully. The other end of the spectrum is social entrepreneurs who actually, they needed to be much more focused on impact investors and not general venture capitalists. We found a lot of them would go and pitch to, your traditional venture capitalists, and they would get demotivated because they just kept getting rejected because they weren't fit for purpose there. And I would say the other category is some people were developing really good revenue from their customers. So we really encourage them to think about timing on when or if venture capital was relevant, because if they continue to own 100% of the business and they were able to bootstrap, that was actually a better route for them. So we had a very, very different mix. And that's why I would say at the stage they're at, maybe later during the line, a venture capital may be more appropriate, but we find a lot of cases they're pushed towards that route even when it's not the right time or it's not appropriate.
Thanks very much for answering this question. The next question comes from Dr. Rocky, and I see Dr. Rocky has his webcam on, so you can actually see him when you answer to him. Dr. Rocky is asking, in our TVET, we promote social entrepreneurship. How can we connect to help scale? Is it clear enough for you, or need some elaboration for that question?
No, so I think I understand that question. So one of the things where we had quite technical PhDs or people who'd done very technical masters, we made sure, number one, they had a mentor who was much more commercial and had extensive management experience. And then when we did one-to-one, when our program leaders did one-to-one coaching, we focused more on the management side of things and worked with them to understand where their gaps are and how we could help them fill them, either with mentors or connections to board advisors or connections within our universities that could help fill that skill gap.
Thank you. So the next question comes from Endro Katur. So TVET graduates are usually highly technical. How would they navigate the management aspect of startups? Are there experience that they team up with non-TVET graduates?
Sorry, I think I just answered that question rather than the one before. So just on the teaming up with non-TVET graduates, I did do a program in New York where we connected business school graduates from Columbia with people who were, for example, in the architecture space. So there was a program that I was part of coaching that helped to do that. And that can be very successful, but you have to be slightly careful because a lot also just depends on the chemistry of the founders that you put together. So I do think matching programs can work, but I think you have to be quite selective and quite careful in how you do that for that relationship to work over time.
Okay, I saw that in the chat. I don't see any questions anymore. I just wrote an encouragement. If Kajal, if you are okay, maybe we do something rather spontaneous.
I know Sam. If Sam, I know he may have wanted some more Q&A. So happy to. I have some questions for him as well, but happy to.
So let's do that. Sam, are you still around? Yes, please go on camera. Yes. And may I ask Bianca to spotlight you? So so maybe we start actually. Kajal is asking Sam a question, and maybe that triggers off some more interaction for the last 12 minutes, because I'm sure some people are holding back. So Kajal, difficult question for Sam.
A difficult question. So I think, Sam, it goes back to your point on being too academic. So I would say we've experienced the same challenge where you have lots of theory, or you're trying to really persuade academic institutions that entrepreneurial skills are really necessary, and to invest in programs like accelerators and incubators. So my question, the hard question is, what is your most persuasive argument? If you could summarize that in 2 or 3 lines, what really is that moves the needle for academic institutions to invest in entrepreneurial skill building?
Sure. So actually, I kind of alluded to it in my slides early on. And actually, the key thing is to be able to address it right at the top, where they actually look at it as a core competency rather than as a peripheral competency. I think from the slides I also shown, and in fact, from the video of the lady, she actually found that the learning was actually very useful to her in terms of when she actually went on to work, even with a corporate. So I think if you're going to try to fight the war, so to speak, with the academics, I think the best thing is to go all the way to the top and basically say, look, these are actually the studies that we actually have. This is the feedback from the students that have actually gone through this. And perhaps you may actually want to consider putting the core competency, which I think the other point I also wanted to share is that if you do indeed succeed to do so, actually you will have a whole army of people being able to go out there to effect change.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just add to that, to Sam's point, is we've also found that having those metrics really clearly defined on why are you running these programs and what are the outcomes that you want, doing that up front and being quite careful in how you design the measurement of the program, it is very important in the end to then have a legacy of results that you can share.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe just to add on to that, that provides for the academic rigor, but I guess that will be a discussion with the academics rather than to basically take it further up to be able to put it right across the whole institution.
So I'm not seeing, there is a question. Andrew is asking, hang on, are there specific challenges connecting startups by TVET graduates with VCs or angel investors, say, compared with general startups, especially those founded by Flying Colors IB graduates? So you look at the chat to, any of you would like to answer? Any takers?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just take it if you don't mind, Kajal. So very briefly, if I got the question correctly, I think what we found is that there was actually not too much distinction between the those that actually have a 4.0 grade average versus those who perhaps didn't do so well from an academic standpoint. Because that's why I put my last slide early on. Once they actually found a purpose, they really sink their teeth into it and they actually really go for it. I think generally they may not be academically smart sometimes for a certain batch, but they could actually be very, very street smart. And once they actually have that, they really, really go for it.
Thank you. And there is another question coming in from Erica. So for startups where the entrepreneur is a business, as Kajal said, angel investors and grants are usually the main source of seed funding during the early stage. But what about business loans from, say, banks? Is this advisable? Helps if an entrepreneur has a good credit standing or have connections willing to support the business? Any particular data on this from the program? I think that's for Kajal.
Thanks, Erica, for the question. We actually, maybe, I think across all of the programs which we ran, very few actually went for the bank loans. And that's, I think, a function of the market, because seed funding, one, we had a number of connections which we put startups in to angels and to other sources of funding where they didn't really need to go to the bank. Would I say it's advisable? I think, again, it's really case by case. It's very specific. I think if you can find good angels and seed investors, that was usually the preference, because they also had knowledge and more connections that would help the startups versus a bank. One partner I would say worked very well with us was Silicon Valley Bank. I think they provide a lot of expertise beyond just a business. You can actually access debt with them, and there's different finance products for early stage startups, but most mainstream banks don't, I think, really don't have fit for purpose products for the type of startups that we were coaching through our programs.
Yeah, maybe just to add on that, in fact, we strongly discourage to go to the banks because, to be quite frank, if I think Kajal mentioned quite a few options just now, and as startups, as Kajal has mentioned, it's no guarantee that they're going to succeed. And the last thing you want to do is when you have to shut down for whatever reason. And again, just now the finding was that because they ran out of cash, the last thing you want to do is to have to deal with the bank after as a post-mortem action. So I think in our programs, we strongly discourage going to the banks.
Thanks, Sam. Are there any more questions, guys? So we have officially another 7 minutes. We don't have to be so strict, but any last questions? Yeah, actually, I don't see any more questions. I noticed that actually our main host has joined. Mr. Prajesh Pant, so welcome, but I guess he's just joined a second ago, probably to see how it's going. So I think we're coming to the end of the session, right? So can I request all of you to give a virtual hand to Kajal and Sam for sharing their experience and expertise. And like yesterday, I think we are going to take a group picture for everybody who doesn't mind to be seen. So may I request everybody who is here and enjoyed the session to switch on your webcam so that we have a picture from our breakout with all the people who were participating and listening in. So, and I will request also, so maybe we can get some more cameras. And I see Mr. Prajesh, thank you for joining us. And so please don't be shy. I'm sure you're looking good. So a little bit more cameras. We have space for actually for everybody. I think 40 people are more or less in the meeting. So if you have a background, I give you another 10 seconds. Okay, so let's take a picture. Bianca, are you doing that for us, please?
Yes, I'll count.
Okay, you can count. You Filipino people are much better in group picture than me.
All right. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, smile. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So one more time, thank you, Kajal and Sam. Maybe Brajesh, you want to say something to our two experts as you are here?
Thank you, Joost. I think overall, I'm very happy with the program, and particularly, the program on entrepreneurship is very important for youth, and I see a lot of people aspiring to learn and also look at new opportunities. We have had excellent partnership with Singapore Polytechnic, and we'll continue to look forward to looking at how we can build such programs for our developing member countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brajesh. And for the people who maybe haven't joined on day one, Mr. Brajesh and his team are the organizers of this wonderful skills forum. And so thank you very much, Brajesh, for creating this wonderful 9th International Skills Forum.
I'm using my iPad. That's why my standard background is not there. So
don't worry about that. Okay, so that's it for today. So just as a reminder, tomorrow is day 4 and it's on higher education transformation. So if this is your topic, we hopefully welcome many of you back. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock Manila time, we have an interesting keynote. We have then a panel discussion on the future of higher education and digital transformation. And again, our innovation marketplace where you can choose from different options. So that's it for today. I thank Sam. You probably have an evening. Kajal, you enjoy your lunch because you're joining us from London. I guess you're still in the morning. And thanks all of everybody who joined us today, and see you hopefully tomorrow. That's it for today. See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.